If you think the Great Depression history is just stock market charts, you've been lied to. In this historical documentary deep dive, we are uncovering the untold history secrets of 1930s breadlines and the survival foods that were so deeply unsettling they were completely wiped from modern memory. Millions surviving the roaring 20s crash had to eat things that would make a modern stomach turn. And the emergency recipe at number 2, the government meat sludge, left an entire generation with literal, lifelong psychological trauma. If you want to see what vintage American history actually looked like behind closed doors, watch this. The reality of Great Depression survival gets significantly darker than any textbook dares to admit.
Number 7, the Prune Casserole Mandate. When the economy collapsed, federal Great Depression relief programs flooded urban soup kitchens with tons of cheap, dried prunes simply because they were lightweight and wouldn't rot in transit. Official government-issued pamphlets forced desperate broke mothers to mix this sweet fruit directly into savory dinner rations. They mashed it into navy beans and gray, low-grade meat scraps, making it a staple of 1930s breadlines. It created a slimy, sweet and savory sludge that a generation of children absolutely loathed, representing the absolute failure of early state-sponsored Great Depression food relief. The psychological toll of forcing children to eat sweet grease just to stay alive left scars that lasted a lifetime.
Number 6, Mulligan stew with tobacco rind. Deep within the metropolitan shantytowns and Hoovervilles, municipal cooks had to extract flavor from absolute filth when actual meat supplies ran completely dry. They boiled used tobacco plugs and old leather directly into the water for a bitter, smoky kick that mimicked the richness of meat, creating an infamous shantytown survival recipe. The dissolved nicotine and heavy tobacco rinds chemically blunted their hunger pangs for hours, but this dark chapter of Great Depression history reveals it left men with burning throats, raw mouth ulcers, and severe stomach cramps. It was a desperate chemical trade-off, trading the agony of starvation for the pain of chemical poisoning.
Number 5, the Cold Depression Loaf. To ensure absolute zero waste occurred in metropolitan relief centers, municipal butchers collected the animal parts usually thrown to the dogs, such as skin, ears, cartilage, and hooves. In this era of grim historical food survival, they boiled these scraps for 12 hours until the natural gelatin completely dissolved, then poured the liquid into pans to cool into an ash-gray brick. 1930s breadlines handed these slimy slices directly to starving men because it required zero municipal fuel or heat to cook, forcing families to chew through cold, rubbery animal tendons just to stay alive. This mechanical fuel-saving measure meant that survival was served freezing cold and intensely greasy.
Number 4, lard and sugar sandwiches. When charity kitchens ran completely out of soup supplies, the absolute bottom of the breadline ration was reduced to raw, unheated calories. Families surviving the aftermath of the roaring 20s crash had to turn to desperate measures to keep their children's organs from shutting down. Mothers took stale bread crusts, smeared them with a thick layer of cold, raw animal hog lard for essential fats, and sprinkled coarse white sugar over the top for quick energy. This staple of vintage American history was granular, intensely greasy, and coated the inside of a child's mouth like heavy machinery oil. It provided a sudden spike of artificial energy, but left a sickening, heavy film that made eating a miserable chore.
Number 3, salt pork skinnings broth. In the hardest-hit urban centers, true breadlines at their worst didn't even have access to cheap vegetables or stale breadcrumbs. Relief kitchen vats were completely empty of actual sustenance. Great Depression history records show that kitchens simply boiled the discarded, salted skins of pigs in bare water to create a basic hot liquid ration. It was agonizingly salty and possessed almost zero nutritional value, but the hot fluid bloated the stomach to temporarily stop the physical pain of starvation, acting as a brutal tool for 1930s breadline survival. Desperate citizens drank the boiling brine, ignoring the floating hair follicles, just to feel a false sense of fullness.
Number 2, the Coronado canned mutton sludge. This brings us to the food that left an entire generation of Americans with literal lifelong psychological scars. During the height of the agricultural crisis, the federal government purchased millions of starving, low-grade sheep from drought-stricken areas to aid bankrupt farmers. They ground up the entire carcasses, including the heavy fat, organs, and connective tissue, and canned it under the official government relief label Coronado, forcing it onto urban 1930s breadlines. The odor, when heated, was so intensely foul and rancid that the sheer grease triggered massive outbreaks of nausea and vomiting across relief camps, leaving a dark, unforgettable stain on vintage American history. For decades after the Depression ended, survivors reported that the mere smell of cooking lamb would instantly trigger intense feelings of anxiety and disgust. Number 1. Yeast and vinegar emergency soup. This is the absolute rock bottom of human survival during the Great Depression, a desperate artificial recipe pushed onto emergency city kitchens when all agricultural food supplies completely collapsed. Relief workers mixed boiling water, cheap white vinegar, and live baker's yeast with absolutely zero meat, vegetables, or starch. The mixture was highly acidic and chemically alive. When consumed, the yeast reacted violently with stomach acids, causing the liquid to gas up and physically bloat the human abdomen from the inside out. It provided zero nutrients. This stands as one of the most haunting, untold history secrets of Great Depression survival, a cruel chemical illusion designed to physically stretch the stomach so the brain would stop registering starvation pangs. The mainstream media and modern documentaries love to romanticize vintage American history, painting the 1930s as a time of simple, dignified struggle. But the unfiltered truth is much darker, uglier, and intentionally hidden behind closed doors. Traditional textbooks hide these historical documentary stories because they prove just how fragile society really is when the system completely breaks down. If you want the raw, unfiltered truth about the past, the untold history secrets, and the government cover-ups, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't let the real stories of our ancestors fade away. Hit that button and join us. Because if you think surviving on vinegar soup and sheep sludge in the 1930s breadlines was the absolute worst thing Americans endured, you are dead wrong. When the government realized the cities were on the verge of massive starvation riots, they enacted a series of secret, forbidden laws just to keep citizens in check. And what they did to enforce compliance is much more terrifying than what was on their plates. Click on the video on the screen right now to discover the top 6 worst canned foods Americans ate during economic collapse. Because as the resources vanished entirely, the industrial canning factories began filling shelves with things that defy belief. And it proves that if you think the Great Depression history is just stock market charts, you've been lied to.